Suzanne Margaret Basso spent 14 years on death row, her life ticking away in a Texas cell. But to understand how she ended up there, we have to rewind to the beginning, a story of lies, pain, and choices that led to a brutal crime. Suzanne Margaret Burns, later known as Basso, was born on May 15, 1954, in Schenectady, New York, into a troubled family. One of 8 children born to Florence Garrow and John Richard Burns, she grew up in a working-class home marked by poverty and dysfunction. Her mother was the sister of Robert Garrow, a notorious spree killer and rapist, which added a dark stigma to the family. Suzanne faced a harsh childhood, with reports of physical and sexual abuse by relatives. Her daughter, Christiana Hardy, later testified that Suzanne endured sexual molestation by several male family members and physical abuse from both men and women in the household. One chilling story, shared by Hardy, described how Suzanne's mother caught her with cigarettes as a child and forced her to eat them as punishment, a cruel act that left a lasting mark. As a teenager, Suzanne showed early signs of trouble, getting into fights, skipping school, and stealing, which led to her being sent to a Catholic boarding school in Albany, New York. By her teens, she was already spinning elaborate lies, stories of being a triplet or working for the New York governor, to escape her grim reality. Despite her later claims of a grand education in Europe, she never attended college and struggled academically in high school. The abuse and neglect she faced fueled her tendency to lie and manipulate, traits that would define her later life. Did these early traumas shape her into the person who could orchestrate such a heinous crime, or was there something deeper at play? In the early 1970s, Suzanne married a Marine named James Peake, becoming Sue Peake. They had 2 children, a daughter in 1973 and a son in 1974. But the marriage was a disaster. James was arrested in 1982 for molesting their daughter, a crime that tore the family apart. Suzanne stayed with him, but the cracks were showing. In the early 1990s, they moved to Houston, Texas, changing their surname to O'Malley and adopting an Irish-American identity, as if running from their past. Suzanne took odd jobs, like working as a security guard, but her life was a tangle of deception. In 1993, she started a relationship with Carmine Basso, a New Jersey man, calling him her husband even though she never divorced Peake. When Carmine died in 1997, Suzanne was left alone, her lies growing bigger and her world growing smaller. What would push her from this troubled life to something far worse? Louis Charles Buddy Musso was a 59-year-old man with a gentle spirit and a heart full of hope. Born on March 26, 1939, Buddy lived in Cliffside Park, New Jersey, in an assisted living home, where he was known for the country music that poured from his apartment. Neighbors often heard him singing along, his voice carrying a simple joy. Buddy had a mental disability, with an intellectual capacity some compared to that of an 8-year-old, but he was fiercely independent. He worked as a bagger at a local ShopRite, greeting customers with a warm smile and a kind word. Buddy had been married once, to a woman he loved deeply, but she died of cancer in 1980, leaving him with a son, Tony, and a lingering loneliness. Buddy's dream was to love and be loved again. He cherished the idea of being a husband, of building a life with someone who cared for him. He was a regular at church, where his faith gave him comfort, and he took religious classes, even getting baptized. His friends described him as trusting, almost childlike in his openness, always eager to see the good in people. In the spring of 1997, at a church bazaar near his home, Buddy met 43-year-old Suzanne Basso. She was charming, attentive, and seemed to see him in a way others didn't. Their long-distance relationship blossomed quickly, with Buddy blushing after every phone call, calling her "my lady love." When Basso invited him to move to Texas to be with her, promising marriage, Buddy was thrilled. He bought a cheap engagement ring, packed his Western-style clothes, and boarded a Greyhound bus on June 14, 1998, dreaming of a new life. But what awaited him in Texas was far from the love he sought. The crime that took Buddy Musso's life unfolded in August 1998 in Jacinto City, Texas, a quiet Houston suburb where Basso lived in a small house with her son, James O'Malley, and others. Buddy had been in Texas for just 16 days, staying with Basso, who had taken out life insurance policies on him. including one worth $65,000 if he died violently. Her motive was clear: greed. She had also forged a will naming herself as Buddy's heir, planning to claim his Social Security benefits and any assets. But her scheme required Buddy's death, and she enlisted a group to help her carry it out. The torture began soon after Buddy arrived. Basso, her son James O'Malley, Bernice Aarons, her children Craig and Hope Aarons, and Hope's fiancé, Terrence Singleton, turned Buddy's new home into a nightmare. They forced him to do chores, treating him like a slave. Over 5 days, starting around August 21st, the group subjected Buddy to relentless abuse at Bernice Aarons' apartment. They beat him with belts, fists, and a baseball bat, leaving hundreds of bruises across his body. They kicked him with steel-toed boots, breaking his nose and ribs. Cigarette burns scarred his back, and lash marks striped his buttocks. Basso, who weighed over 300 pounds, jumped on Buddy as he knelt on a child's play mat, worsening his injuries. Why did they go so far? Buddy's pleas for help went ignored. He wrote a note to a friend in New Jersey, begging, "You must get down here and get me out of here," but it never reached its destination. When he asked for an ambulance, the group refused. On August 22nd, a Houston police officer, Jeff Butcher, saw O'Malley and Singleton forcing Buddy on a military-style run near the apartment. Buddy, with 2 black eyes, told the officer he'd been beaten by 3 Mexicans, likely a lie fed to him by his abusers. Butcher drove them back to the apartment, unaware of the danger, where Basso claimed to be Buddy's legal guardian. The final act came on August 25, 1998. After days of torture, the group took Buddy to a bathroom in Aaron's apartment. There, they stripped him and placed him in a bathtub filled with bleach, Comet, and Pine Sol, scrubbing his battered body with a wire brush. It's unclear if Buddy was still alive during this horrific act, but his body gave out, likely from a skull fracture caused by an unknown object that left an X-shaped cut on his scalp. After his death, the group dressed his body in clean clothes, putting one shoe on the wrong foot, and dumped him in a ditch in Galena Park, Texas. After Buddy Musso's battered body was found in a ditch in Galena Park, Texas, on August 26, 1998, the police launched a swift investigation. The brutality of the crime, hundreds of bruises, broken bones, and cigarette burns, pointed to a group effort, not a single killer. A jogger's discovery of the body triggered a manhunt, and suspicion quickly fell on Suzanne Basso. She had reported Buddy missing that same day at the Jacinto City police station, spinning a tale about him running off with a Mexican lady. But her story didn't add up. Why would a man who adored her vanish without a trace? Investigators searched Basso's home and found damning evidence. Blood on baseball bats, clothing, and sheets, linking her to the crime scene. A breakthrough came when James O'Malley, Basso's son, cracked under pressure and confessed. He detailed the 5-day torture of Buddy, naming Basso as the ringleader who orchestrated the abuse for insurance money. O'Malley led police to a dumpster where they found more evidence, including bloody items tied to the murder. Witness testimony also played a key role. A neighbor reported seeing Buddy, bruised and beaten, being forced to run by O'Malley and Terrence Singleton days before his death. Another clue was a note Buddy had written to a friend in New Jersey, pleading for rescue, found in his pants. It never reached its recipient, but it showed his desperation. On September 1, 1998, police arrested Basso and her 5 accomplices, James O'Malley, Bernice Aarons, Craig Aarons, Hope Aarons, and Terrence Singleton, in Houston. Basso didn't try to flee but played the victim, claiming she was innocent and spinning wild lies about her background. She never confessed, sticking to her story even as evidence piled up. At her 1999 trial in Harris County, the case came together through O'Malley's testimony, physical evidence, and the forged will and insurance policies naming Basso as Buddy's beneficiary. The jury saw through her lies, convicting her of capital murder and sentencing her to death in October 1999. But would she ever admit the truth? Suzanne Basso spent 14 years on death row at the Mountain View Unit, now Patrick O'Daniel Unit, in Gatesville, Texas, where the state's female death row inmates were held. The prison was a stark, controlled environment, small cells, strict schedules, and constant oversight by guards. Her lawyer argued it was a degenerative disease, But Basso stuck to her dramatic stories, even claiming a snake was smuggled into a prison hospital to kill her. Was she delusional, or was this another lie to gain sympathy? In prison, Basso's behavior was erratic. She spoke in a high-pitched, childlike voice, claiming she'd regressed to her childhood and even insisted she was blind. A court-appointed psychiatrist testified she was faking mental illness to avoid execution, and a judge ruled her competent. Her appeals focused on her mental health and claims of an unfair trial, arguing the medical examiner's testimony was unreliable and no mitigating evidence about her abusive childhood was presented. But every appeal failed. Basso had little interaction with other inmates, as death row meant 23 hours a day in isolation. She spent her days reading, writing, or talking to guards, often trying to manipulate them with her stories. Some guards found her difficult, others pitied her, but none believed she'd changed. She never spoke of Buddy or expressed regret, focusing instead on her own suffering. As her execution date, February 5, 2014, neared, she made a last-ditch appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, claiming she was too delusional to be executed. It was rejected. What would she say when the final moment came? On February 5, 2014, Suzanne Basso woke up in her cell at the Patrick O'Daniel unit in Gatesville, Texas, knowing it was her last day. The morning was quiet, with the usual prison routine: a wake-up call, a quick breakfast, and the hum of guards moving through the halls. Basso, confined to a wheelchair and claiming paralysis, spent her early hours alone, likely reflecting on the 14 years she'd spent on death row. Did she think about Buddy Musso, the man she tortured and killed, or was her mind still tangled in her web of lies? Records don't mention any family visits that day, but 2 friends were allowed to see her later, their presence a small comfort in her final hours. As noon approached, Basso was moved to the Huntsville unit, Texas's execution chamber, about 70 miles away. She was given the standard prison meal for lunch: baked chicken, fish, boiled eggs, carrots, green beans, and sliced bread, since Texas had stopped allowing special last meal requests in 2011. Did she eat with appetite, or did the weight of the day make the food tasteless? In the afternoon, she met with her spiritual advisors, who stayed with her as the clock ticked closer to 6 p.m. Basso, who had spent years claiming mental illness and delusions, was calm but emotional, her eyes welling with tears as she faced the end. At around 2:15 p.m., guards led Basso into the execution chamber, dressed in a white prison uniform. The room was small, with a gurney at the center and a window for witnesses, including her 2 friends and media observers. The victims' families were not reported present, but their pain hung heavy in the air. When the warden asked if she had any final words, Basso looked at him and said, "No, sir," her voice steady but her face betraying emotion. She turned to her friends, mouthed the word "bye," and nodded, a faint smile crossing her lips. Was it defiance, regret, or something else? At 6:15 p.m. Central Standard Time, the lethal injection began, a single dose of pentobarbital, administered through and 4. Basso started to snore, a deep sound that grew quieter as the drug took effect. Her breathing slowed, then stopped. 11 minutes later, at 6:26 p.m., she was pronounced dead. The execution was swift, with no complications, unlike some botched cases that had sparked debate about lethal injection. As the witnesses left the chamber, what lingered was the memory of Buddy Musso, a man whose trust led to his brutal end, and the question: did Basso ever truly face the weight of her actions? Suzanne Basso's life ended in a sterile execution chamber, but the echoes of her crime, the brutal torture of a trusting man, still linger. Her story, from a troubled childhood to a calculated murder, leaves us grappling with the darkness of human choices. What drives someone to betray trust so completely? And how can we protect the vulnerable from those who prey on hope?